Okay, we may have other folks join us as we continue, but we will go ahead and start. It is after 10, and this was when we were supposed to start. So, welcome. And this is Incorporating Positive Youth Development into Programming. My name is Robin Donaldson. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at Indiana Youth Service Association. We had done this a few years back, wanted to update the video that is going to be on our YouTube training channel, and that's if you go to YouTube, Indiana Youth Service Association, we do have a training channel where we try to record and then upload these videos, so that will be available afterwards. And other housekeeping would include the fact that you guys can get certificates of attendance after you are finished. If you would just go ahead and you can email Jamisha Harris, and I am going to go ahead and put in her email address, but you guys should have it, jharris@indsb.org, and let her know that you attended, and then give her the names of the folks who need certificates. We can get those out to you as well. And then lastly, if you guys do have questions, feel free to ask them at any time. You can, everyone is muted. I think that the system does that automatically. So you'll have to unmute yourself to ask questions, or you can type it into the chat feature. So we will go ahead and start. And what we're going to talk about today, we're going to do a basic overview of positive youth development, look at criteria for PYD and youth programming. We will talk about the benefits of positive youth development, not only for the young people, but also for the staff and agency. And then we'll look at some very practical applications of positive youth development with some specific examples. And this would be where, I have examples and we'll talk about what those are, but if you guys have other examples of how you are incorporating positive youth development at your agency, then it would be a perfect time to kind of chime in, and we can kind of share and learn from everyone. So with that, positive youth development basically is structuring an environment so that youth have the opportunity to grow and to thrive. So it is providing them with learning opportunities, it is giving them a voice, it is soliciting their feedback and giving them leadership positions. And we'll talk about all of those in detail a little bit, but really is about creating an environment that is beneficial and for young people. It's sometimes easier to understand what positive youth development is by comparing it to what positive youth development is not. It is certainly about being open. Hopefully that siren's not too distracting for you guys. But it is about kind of being open and understanding about each individual young person and embracing them on that individual basis, knowing that all kids bring something different to your group and to your programming, and not making judgments about, kind of not only what they look like when they come in, because I think we're pretty good about not doing that, but, sometimes we will get a history of a young person, from the referral source, and judgments can come from those as well. So just kind of keeping in mind that one person's experience with a young person doesn't mean that's who that young person is. So kind of keeping that open mind. It is not telling them what to do. Positive youth development is actually allowing them choices, giving them different options, and supporting their decisions, even if sometimes we don't agree with those decisions. And we can verbalize why we don't agree with those decisions and help them maybe see different perspectives, but still supporting them as they make those choices. Positive youth development is also going to be when you have an environment that is very PYD focused, young people feel safe, and they feel safe enough to open up and to share their experiences and to share those emotions. And I know that sometimes that's difficult to hear, so we want to make sure that when they're doing that, we have maybe if they start to open up about something that might need some clinical focus, listening and then encouraging them to speak to someone who has that background, but really is allowing them to express themselves. and express their needs, hearing that out, and then being able to kind of match that as we are able to do that. And it's also helping them understand what boundaries are. It is not letting kids do whatever they want. Positive youth development is about helping young people learn to navigate their environments. And almost all of their environments have boundaries. There are things that they can't do and they can't do. So helping them navigate, understanding the differences of, sometimes what they can do in one situation, and what they can't do in other situations, so that they are ultimately successful when they are out there on their own making their decisions and engaging in interactions and behaviors with other folks. All right. So there are a couple of different ways to look at positive youth development. The two that are probably the most well-known would be the 40 developmental assets. We'll talk about that, but also the 5 C's. And this comes from Richard Lerner. And he really looked at the things that he looked at the factors that were incorporated into programming that seemed to encourage the positive development of young people. So he looked at and it was this research study where he went to different organizations. He looked at different programs, and he, determined whether or not they were successful depending upon the kids' behaviors and their ability to negotiate their environments elsewhere. And he found 5 things in common. Now, the original research had 5. Later research, he added a 6th one. But the things that all of these very positive programs had in common were that they taught the young person competency. They taught them skills. Sometimes that was knowledge as well, but it really was about how the young people left that programming with new skills in place and new abilities to manage and negotiate their world. So that competency piece is important. That skills building, knowledge-based building part of your programming is key to positive youth development. One of the other things is probably as well, equally if not more important, is this connection piece. There is tons of research in development, child development, adolescent development, specifically focusing on teenagers, that says that the thing that is most important in determining whether or not a young person will heed the advice of an adult, they'll actually listen to and pay attention to, is the connection and that relationship that they have with an adult. So the connection is important. It is the piece, it's that relationship that allows you to have an influence and a more significant influence on a young person. And we can't have connections with every single kid, but we can, if you have a large staff, maybe move the kids around in different groups until you find that one person, that one adult that they connect with, so that you can build that relationship and enhance your ability to have an impact. Another thing that was in common with all of the programs that were successful was that they actually had kind of a character building component to it. And in some of the cases, it wasn't formal. It was most of them were very informal, but it was, talking about things like responsibility and reliability, being able to positively interact with other people, to be empathetic, and to take other folks' positions into consideration. So being able to put themselves in someone else's position and then engage with that individual accordingly. Things like, moral decision making, right and wrong. So all of those things are a part of, and again, some of this was very, very informal, but it was a part of programming, even if it was just because the adults modeled that type of behavior, or it was just an informal conversation about how, people perceive you, and the things that they think about based upon some of the decisions that you make and the behavior that you show. So building that character. Another one is confidence, and this is really about allowing kids to be successful. Many of the young people that we work with have not had opportunities in their past to be successful, or if they are, it's not acknowledged. And so acknowledging that when they, building situations into your programming where they can succeed, catch them being good. If we talk about adolescents specifically, they are, based upon kind of what's going on in adolescent brain development, they are very, very sensitive to reward. They're kind of, and they will pay attention to that more, so that when we can reward them for that good behavior, it has a more significant impact. They remember that, and they're more likely then to repeat that behavior. And all of this does build that confidence in a young person, so that when they do come across a situation that is difficult, we've given them the skills, that we have someone that believes in them through that connection. We've helped them understand, kind of right for wrong, and talked through some different moral or empathetic situations. And then they have the confidence that they can successfully negotiate that. The fifth original, the last original characteristic was compassion or caring. And a lot of times this shows up in programming through some service learning activities. So taking the young people out to, I don't know, visit with the elderly, or go to, kids love to go to the animal shelters and take them dog treats, not do the stuff like, clean up the poo and that kind of stuff, because that's not really meaningful, but finding those meaningful opportunities for young people to give back to others. And that is absolutely huge, because and another thing that's apparent in the research is that when we actually contribute and help others, when we are doing something for other people, it helps reduce our stress as well. So finding real meaningful opportunities for kids to engage and give back to their communities, whether it is reading to kids who are younger than them. It could be something like they take on a project to clean up a park that they get to go to, and we acknowledge them for that. But the opportunity to allow them to serve someone else or to help someone else, which again builds confidence, it reinforces, the character that we're trying to build. It increases their sense of competency, as well as builds other connections for them. So you can see how all of these are kind of, hopefully you see all of these are very interconnected. And all of that kind of pointed to this very last C that Lerner added after follow-up research, which is the contribution piece, because the caring and compassion was built out of being able to do something for someone, and shows it kind of again connects to the character and building empathy, but being able to have a very positive contribution and being able to I guess it's really about being valued. And when we can contribute, we do feel valued. And that is very important for us to build those opportunities into our programming with our young people. Again, I think we've had a couple of folks join us since we started. Just want to remind you that if you have any questions, I think I'm going the wrong way. Sorry. Then you can chat, either unmute yourself or type those into the chat feature. All right, so another framework that is very, very common and typically now pretty well known in positive youth development is the Search for Developmental Assets. And so we're not going to go over all 40, but there are two different categories with other subcategories under those. So the first one is internal. And the things that seem to make a young person more resilient and help them be more successful is when they actually score positive in all of these areas. So the first one is commitment to learning. So they understand the importance of school. They really care about their performance in school. If they read for pleasure, all of these things are things that help make them more successful. If they do show those positive values, and again, we can kind of see a connection to learner, because this is that character piece where they value integrity, they value being honest, they understand that it's important to be responsible. And when you define yourself in these characteristics as being caring, being responsible, having honest, integrity, or being honest, then it does influence how we behave. So kind of building those. So, kids who are more successful score higher in all of these. Again, there's competency, a crossover with learner, where we are talking about the skills that they have, being able to have positive decision-making skills, or those positive social skills and interaction, and then being able to successfully resolve a conflict, because conflict happens, and not avoiding it, but then just really kind of being able to understand what's going on and successfully resolve that. The last one is positive identity. And this speaks a little bit to kind of the confidence too, but if they have a high sense of self-esteem, if they believe that they're there for a reason, that their life has meaning, that they know what they're doing, and they have a positive sense of future, all of this stuff is indicative of a young person who's going to be more successful. So those are all internal things that the young person thinks and feels about themselves, about their abilities, about what's important to them. We also, and we can impact some of those, but we can have a more direct impact on the external. And so external includes things like support, and this is across their life. So they need to have support in school, even if it's just a single teacher to go to, or it might not even be a teacher. It could be a social worker. It could be their guidance counselor, but they have that one person. And if we can help find those individuals for kids in each of their kind of areas of life, that's the more support that they have, the better. But this really is about that connection to a positive, caring adult. And again, we go back to connection and the learner stuff. Positive youth development is all about empowerment. And it is about being able to provide kids the opportunity to succeed and to contribute in a way that is safe and can support their abilities and their skills that they have. So empowerment is a big part of the Search Institute stuff. Still go back to the fact that kids have to understand that there are those boundaries and what our expectations are. So this is helping kids understand, and for us to make sure that we have very clearly communicated rules and the consequences when those rules are not followed, that we are modeling the behavior that we want, and that we communicate our expectations to the kids, and to actually have high expectations of them, because typically what happens is, as individuals, not just young people, but as individuals across ages, we tend to rise or fall to the expectations that are held of us. So having those high expectations, communicating them, and then providing them with the support and the resources they need to be successful and meet those expectations. So having all of that in place, and then providing them with a constructive use of time. So this is really where you guys, especially if you have after school programming, have a high impact on a young person's the positive youth development and their sense of being able to be successful, because we have this ability to provide them with opportunities, and sometimes it's learning opportunities to experience things that they haven't had a chance to experience before. So whether it's sports or it's art, in some cases, for faith-based, it is that connection to a faith or belief. And then also being able to have constructive use of time at home when they go. And sometimes that's because we have introduced an activity that they really like, and that can carry over to something that they can do at home with those hobbies and things. So those are kind of our, a couple of different ways to look at positive youth development in terms of the components of programming. And we'll look a little bit more in detail about what some of those are, but I just kind of wanted to give you a couple of the more common frameworks when we talk about positive youth development. And hopefully this is not new to you guys. It's something that you have heard before, you guys are using and are familiar with. all of the things that these programs and and all of these components have in common are going to be things that these lists here. So when we're talking about building character, providing safe connections, when we're talking about competencies, it is about this idea of creating a space that is not only physically safe for them, but also psychologically safe for them to try new things. Teenagers particularly like novelty, and we learn better when something is new. We pay attention more when something is new and we haven't experienced it. But it has to be an experience that is safe to encounter. So, not pushing kids. We can introduce new experiences and new skills and new opportunities, but doing so in a way that kids feel safe to participate, where they won't be made fun of. If they've never encountered it before, they may be reluctant to do some of that stuff. So, understanding what the kids' backgrounds are, and maybe doing it in a small group instead of a large group, because kids, especially well, kids in general, but especially teenagers, tend to perform for groups, and if they're not comfortable with something that's new, then they are likely not to engage in that. So again, not pushing them and not making them feel like they are being judged, but encouraging them to participate in new stuff. Some of this stuff is repetitive. So, the emotional and moral support, again, goes back to the connections that we're building with young people, and the character that we're building with them. So supportive adult relationships are hugely important in being able to do that. It is the way that we actually can garner some leverage with kids in order to have that impact. Helping them find positive peer relationships, and again, this could be something that, based upon our programming, they may not have at home, they may not have in their neighborhood, but we can help steer them toward those positive peer relationships, because peers are hugely important, again, in adolescence, and everyone wants to feel like they belong. And that they have value. So a lot of the PYD stuff, all of the things that we've talked about so far, was really providing them with the opportunity to connect with other folks, and to make those positive contributions. Other criteria include, again, building those positive social values. That's that character piece. Providing them opportunities with leadership. That is the opportunity to demonstrate caring and compassion, as well as to contribute. Skills building and mastery speak to the competencies as well as the ability to master their environment. One of the things that teenagers are not very good at doing, actually kids in general are not very good at being able to do, is to transfer skills that they've learned from one environment to another. So they may be very successful in negotiating a positive peer conflict in your program, because you've set those supports in place. You've demonstrated, you've modeled what that behavior looks like. You've helped them practice and walk through that. But they tend to not be able to translate that to going back home and dealing with a conflict in their home with a sibling, or in the neighborhood or at school. So, the more that they practice, the better they're able to do that. But understand that, they may be very good at doing something with us, and that behavior doesn't always translate. So helping, if it is a parent, helping them understand what we're doing in programming so they can mirror some of that at home, or working with teachers to mirror some of the behaviors or the learning experiences that we've provided in programming, so that they can start to demonstrate that behavior in all of their environments and all of their venues. Again, we go back to contribution, and that is linked to all of the C's that we talked about with learner. All of this stuff being able to be more impactful when we can engage, like I said, the communities, the schools, the parents, in supporting all of this type of development. All right, so we'll talk about the benefits and the way that positive youth development benefits kids. And hopefully this makes perfect sense, because as we build those connections, as we build their competence, as we build their confidence, and help them learn new things, it does improve their self-esteem. So it gives them a greater sense of being able to go out into the world, to be successful, to negotiate challenging situations. It also helps them, again, kind of talked about character building, have a sense of responsibility. And when you define yourself as being a responsible person, it really does change the way that we behave. And it's kind of, it builds a guide toward behavior. Because we are doing this in these kind of the sense and the arena of a relationship, that connection that we're building with that young person, it does help build trust that can, when we really are supportive and we work with those linkages within the rest of their life, help them build better relationships with adults, and not only have a sense of trust in other people, but a sense of trust in themselves and their own ability to negotiate and navigate the world. Positive youth development also has a very strong impact on staff. Obviously it strengthens that relationship, and that's important because it allows us to have that greater impact. It is so much better to go to work and to engage with the kids when we like them, when they like us, when everyone's getting along, when there is that sense of commitment and responsibility to one another. You know, you guys are not in this, we don't go into social services. We especially don't go into youth services because of the money. You're there because you want to make a difference. And positive youth development allows you to make that difference and see some of that difference as well. So it helps us with that relationship to have a greater impact, which means that we are able to make a bigger difference with kids. And it also provides us a structure in which to think about not only what we're doing, but how we're doing that. Now, is this something that benefits the young person? Because PYD is all about helping young people grow and build skills. And so if we can think about, if this kid's acting out and I have to engage with them and there has to be a consequence, but we're thinking about this in the framework of positive youth development, then it helps us craft what that consequence is, because the consequence should be something that allows that young person to learn from the experience, to help them grow. So if we're always thinking about this in terms of how is this beneficial to the kid? Is this beneficial to the kids? And is this going to help them learn new skills and be successful? Then it helps us make decisions as we engage with kids in our programming. Positive youth development also benefits our organizations as a whole because it does make it a better place to work. And so there's less staff burnout. There's more consistency because of that. There's just generally a positive attitude and environment, which is beneficial to everyone. When you engage in positive youth development, and kids really appreciate and understand this because they'll see it, they will encourage their friends and to come to programming. They will talk positively about you, and that's the best advertising that you can ask for. So kids actually then become kind of your champions and your spokespeople for your programming because they really understand and engage, and that has a significant impact on their own peer group, because then they'd be more likely to attend, but also on adults. When adults hear young people speak positively about their interactions in programming, it really has a greater impact than you just showing numbers. It also allows you then to, you have better outcomes. You can show a positive impact. And this does, affect your funding, your stakeholders. You have that ability to report those positive outcomes to all of those key decision makers or stakeholders that affect the resources that you have and the funding that you might have in programming. All right. Any questions about kind of the framework and the benefits and the reasons that we engage in positive youth development and make sure that we're incorporating that into programming? And again, you guys are all muted, so you will have to unmute yourself if you want to speak, but you can also type things into the chat feature as well. All right, well, I'll go ahead. You guys still feel free to type questions that you might have. But let's look at what positive youth development looks like in specific examples. So if we think about positive youth development in the framework of an environment, then we're going to look for things like your programming is in a safe location. They have a safe entrance and able to, or in order to get into the place. And sometimes your programming, now you guys don't have a whole lot of control about where your buildings are located, but you can control things like what, if is there lighting outside? Is there, sometimes we feel safer when we know that there's, the security cameras, because that just the presence of security cameras and lighting seems to deter any type of criminal behavior. So keeping those things in mind, if they're fencing up, if you need to, friendly fencing if you had to, but that the understanding that it is safe, that you have youth-friendly environments, so that you are open when kids can access that. And most of the time, especially during the school year, that's going to mean evening hours and weekend hours. One of the things that's I don't know that we think about a whole lot is the first person that kids encounter when they walk in the door. Now, who is that person? And it is so important that that person is very youth friendly, that it's a very outgoing person, someone who's really positive, who has a smile on their face, because sometimes, especially if it's the first time that kids are walking in, that can make or break, their whether or not they will stay in programming and how they engage. It certainly can influence how they engage. So having that very first person be very positive, making sure that they say hi to every single kid who comes in the door. Even if they're on the phone, just smiling and waving, but making sure that the kids feel welcomed and acknowledged when they walk in that door. If we can, I've been to a lot of places, and I've been to, every place that's on the phone right now. And I think we do a fairly good job of making sure that our decor is youth friendly. One of the best ways to do that is to get input from the kids or let the kids design. Because as adults, we think we know what kids like, and 9 times out of 10, we're wrong. So having youth have that input, allowing them to be able to contribute to the design and paint or paint the murals or pick out the furniture, whatever the case, pick out the artwork, being able to do that is going to be really impactful and positive, and kids kind of recognize that. And then just kind of having a place to hang out, not do anything. So, whether it's bean bags or some really comfortable furniture, couch, that kind of stuff, having cool things to do, again, get kid impact on what those things are, and making sure that all of those things are available, and so that they understand that you have created an environment that is for them and youth focused, especially if you've had their input, then that's going to have a really impact. So, think about this in terms of your own agency, and take a minute to just picture your entryway, picture your common area, picture, the front door, the way that the kids are coming in. And is it youth friendly? Is it safe? Does it feel safe? What are things that you guys can, just say off of the top of your head that indicates that this is a youth friendly environment? And I'm going to open it up, you guys. Again, we have, several folks online, so hearing from one another about what you're doing to help your environment be youth friendly would be beneficial. So unmute or chat, or type something in. We'll have some specific examples from you guys. Come on, I know you guys have stuff. Okay, so is it Kiana? It says we have several posters that depict young stars that kids would relate to. Okay. Comfortable furniture. And where are you? Who are you with? Youth Service Bureau where? We have 30 of them. Okay, St. Joe. Okay, yes. Okay. All right, thank you. Oops, I moved the wrong thing. There we go. All right, and Bauer says we have a large entryway. Yep. Okay, so you do greet youth as they enter. Angie says they have a lounge with video games, ping pong. Okay, great. Yep, all of the things the kids want to do. All right, so you guys get this. Tech, yep. And did the kids pick those out? Did you guys ask the kids, your young people, what they wanted, what they would be interested in doing? Okay, good deal. So as you, again, kind of visualize your environment, are there things that you could do to change or boost your positive youth development image? Anything that you would want to change? Okay, yeah, Foundation says their teen room was designed by kids. Awesome, yes. All right, so more inviting staff. You know, again, that first person they see is really important. Anything else that you would change? Okay, all right. And Kiana says more in transitional living. When I worked at the Youth Service Bureau of Monroe County, and it was a brand new building, so they and we worked for county government. So if you're not familiar with how county government works, you know they if you do any type of construction work, you have to put bids out, and you are required to go with the lowest bidder. Um, so it was a lot about kind of cutting cost and saving money. And the colors were absolutely atrocious. The building is concrete, you know, those concrete blocks. And that's what the walls were. And it was this just really horrible industrial, you know, that grayish blue color that tends to be like in hospitals and those types of things. The artwork was the motivational, very corporate, you know, teamwork, cooperation kinds of stuff, and it was very sterile. It just, you know, it was felt professional and businesslike, but it wasn't very youth friendly. So over a period of time, we replaced all of that kind of corporate artwork with kid artwork. We did a lot of you know, arts and crafts, and kids are super talented. So you know, or we would just here's an art project. I want to get rid of I want to get rid of some of this stuff. So give me stuff that we can hang. And slowly we kind of, you know, moved away from that corporate artwork to having kid artwork up, which is just immediately more inviting and more friendly. We changed colors too, getting input from the kids. So we had kind of a selection. We changed colors in the bedrooms. You know, we couldn't do anything about those concrete walls, those brick, you know, but we did change the color to make it more warm and inviting. And so those are the types of things to kind of to think of. And again, you kind of feel like I'm preaching to the choir because I know everybody on here, and you guys really do a really good job of this. So if we think about positive youth development in our interactions, there are some things to think of. And if you are a supervisor, so kind of think about this in terms of evaluating employees. If you do any of the hiring, then you know this should be kind of you're asking questions that would indicate how they're going to interact with kids. And so kind of looking at it this way. But our interactions with kids should be all about making that connection. We are not going to have the greatest impact that we can until we have that true connection. And it may not be that every staff person has that connection with every young person that walks in. That's really going to be highly unlikely. But we can find a staff person for each kid. So that they have that one person to go to. So paying attention to that, moving kids around in groups if you have to, until they kind of make that connection. And really paying attention. It's so easy. It's so easy nowadays to, want to check your phone and not be 100% present with the kids. We're busy. We have lots of responsibilities, but just making sure that we are paying attention, that we're 100% present, that we're hearing what they're saying, but we're also noticing what body language is, if there's something else that's going on. A lot of times when I worked at the YSB in Monroe County, we kind of learned a lot about the background that the young person came from when, by using all of our senses, which includes smell. Because sometimes kids just really didn't have great hygiene, and that was because they were either homeless and no one was saying anything. Maybe they had been on the run and they were not admitting to being a runaway, and they just didn't have the opportunity to to shower as frequently as they normally would have, or they just didn't have anyone to teach them how to properly wash themselves. So we can learn a lot by paying attention to all of those types of things. Making sure that we, again, being present is understanding what that young person needs and meeting those needs. So if they're hungry, then we have snacks so that we can feed them. If they need somebody to listen to, we have that appropriate staff person to be able to provide them that type of emotional support. And making sure that we provide this for all kids. Again, feel like I'm preaching to the choir. You guys are doing this. I feel like, but I think it's important to help your staff and pay attention to those kids who are on the fringe, because even though we're inclusive, that doesn't mean that the peer group is 100% inclusive. So making sure that we notice those kids who are not always participating, who are not always invited to be a part of the group by the other kids, and finding ways to build that relationship, not only with ourselves as staff, but also among their peer group, so that everyone can fully participate and feel like they belong. Because remember, that sense of belonging is really, really important. Catch them being good. Again, kids are reward sensitive. The brain is, especially in adolescence, more primed to pay attention and to remember things when there is a reward associated with that. And it doesn't have to be, monetary. It doesn't have to be stuff. It can be simply acknowledgement and praise. So catch them being good, because that will support that behavior and encourage them to repeat that behavior and build that those positive skills and characteristics. And then use those teachable moments. Not everyone's going to be successful 100% of the time. And all that means is that it gives us an opportunity to help kids build skills. And when we frame that for them as well, when something doesn't go right, when we don't get it right the first time, that just means that we have an opportunity to learn something new. So framing those types of, it's not a failure. It's an opportunity to learn. When there is a consequence that needs to happen because they didn't behave the way that we wanted them to, that should be a teachable moment where we're sitting down with them and helping them understand the reason that behavior is inappropriate in the first place, and then different things that they can do in that moment. So again, we're helping them learn more positive ways in which to interact. All right. So PYD in action, again, is, kind of thinking about the last time that you engaged with a young person. And you can do this you're thinking about a specific interaction that you've had with kids. If you are supervising other people, using this as part of their evaluation, looking at what are those indicators that demonstrate that they understand positive youth development, and what do you need to add and change. And I think I may have later on in this slide kind of some indicators of what to look for there. All right. Remember, contribution was added to learners' 5 C's, so it became 6 C's, because contribution really did incorporate a lot of the 5 previous C's, and seemed to be the thing that really encapsulated the significant contributions the programming made. And it was real. Empowerment is a huge part of the external support that we provide to young people in the search for developmental assets. So this really is about allowing young people to have a voice. And you can do this several different ways. You can establish a youth advisory council, or you can simply do evaluations and surveys. When I was at Youth Service Bureau of Monroe County, we had summer programming. It was, for our purposes, an educational program, but we called it a recreation program because kids don't want to do anything educational during the summer, right? So language is really important, but it was our summer recreation program. We had different themes, and we had a number of different choices. So when we were first developing this, we had a choice of all of the different themes that we could do. So it was things like science, history, we had animals, we had arts. There were a whole, like, I can't remember all of them because that was a while back, but we had several weeks, and they each had a theme. And so when we were developing this, the kids helped select what those themes were, and then we had different activities, and the kids helped select what those activities were. And every year we did evaluations on those activities, on those themes. Did they like this? What else would they like to do? And so it helped kind of guide what we were doing, and not only in creating it, but then also sustaining in what we did the following years. Because things change and there are new opportunities, and kids had new ideas about how to, different activities that we could do during some of those weeks. So if even if you can't do that, a youth advisory council, there are ways to get their input and their feedback. Again, if you have an opportunity to let them decorate, to help them, whether it's artwork or whatever, provide them that choice, or provide them that opportunity to contribute. It's really cool to walk in somewhere and see your artwork displayed. That means something, and it is very valuable, and it builds that confidence, and it builds that sense of contribution and competency for young people. When we can, give them choices. Allow them to choose, because, and this is true for adults of all ages, when we have choice, when we are choosing to do something, and it is our choice to do that, we are more invested in it. We will stick with it longer. We tend to like it better when it is our choice. And so they're just as simply more investment when we allow them those choices, and they can commit to that choice. And then again, the meaningful roles piece goes back to that ability to contribute positively in valuable and meaningful ways. And if you don't know what kids would find meaningful, ask them what they would find meaningful. We would go to the animal shelter, but we wouldn't clean up dog poop. It was one of the things that I thought, that's not a good use of our kids' time, and it really didn't convey a sense of importance to them. The only thing that they're good for is to clean up poo. That wasn't the message that we wanted to give to the kids when we found these types of service learning, or the community service projects for them. So instead, they played with the animals. They took them for walks. We would make doggy treats, and take those with us. and they would set those. So those types of things. And again, ask the kids what they want to do. And you may have to have several different options available to them, because not every kid is going to like the same thing, but being able to provide them with those roles. All right. So again, kind of think about what type of evaluation you use, not only for programming, but also for just staff evaluations as well. And can you solicit youth input into those types of things? I don't know that you necessarily want to solicit kid input into staff evaluations. Per se, but you certainly can look at what those interactions are. And we always had an exit evaluation, and kids would talk about what they liked and what they didn't like. And inevitably, they would, unsolicited, talk about the staff people who had the best or the greatest impact on them, the one that they liked. And so, we looked at those things and we took those things into consideration and used that input to make changes to our programs. So think about not only collecting it, but then really looking at it and using it so that it is significantly and positively impacting your program. Let's see. Maybe I don't. Okay, there we go. Okay, I just want to make sure I had that. So again, a lot of what you guys do is already positive youth development. It really is just kind of acknowledging that this behavior is part of this more positive framework. It doesn't have to be big. The small things are probably the things that count the most. And so you can go very simple. And if it's nothing more than encouraging you and your staff to think about, how does this positively impact our kids? Are our young people learning from things by what we are doing, by what I'm getting ready to say, by the consequence that we're getting ready to establish? If that's the framework in which we are doing everything, then that's positive youth development in a nutshell. So, thinking about ways to incorporate this within your agency, to incorporate this as part of staff evaluations, there are some specific things. And these are kind of the indicators that we can look at. What is your attendance? And do those kids come back? Is it, especially when it's voluntary, are they showing up day after day after day, completely on their own? Because if they are, that means that's and they're engaged, then that's a place that they want to be. Are they that active participation, that they're really doing the things and they're taking advantage of the opportunities? Do they feel comfortable? And sometimes comfortable for kids looks like, their ability to speak their mind even when they're unhappy about stuff. So that because that means that they feel safe with you and with your staff to be able to express their true opinions, and when they are unhappy. Looking at those positive relationships, do those kids come back even when they're out of programming? Do they come back and visit? Because that, and sometimes they won't ever, we don't know in the moment. We don't know when they're in programming, but after they have finished programming, do they come back and just to say hi, because we've established that positive relationship? Or when they really are experiencing a difficult time, do they come back to us and seek that help? Because that, again, is going to be indicative of that connection and that feeling of safety and comfort. Asking kids to be able to contribute, again, that you can look around and you can say, we're doing this as part of this program because it was a kid's suggestion, or this is, the kid, like Andy said, the kids decorated the teen room, and being able to point all of those things out. When we look at specifically about kind of behavior that kids are engaging in, again, they're open, they are active, they're sharing ideas, they are responsible for their own choices, they are responsible for their own behavior, because that is indicative of the connection and the relationship that they have. kids say, I didn't do this because I didn't want to disappoint Miss or Mr. So-and-so. So they're actually thinking about that, and that relationship is important enough to help guide their behavior. Allowing them to take leadership positions when they can. So if you have an older group that's working with a younger group, and I mean, obviously staff is supervising, but allowing them kind of those peer leadership roles, another way to be to really support their contribution and their sense of meaning and responsibility and connection to other people. And then youth just say, I feel like people listen to me. I feel like, I have meaning here. I feel like, I make a positive contribution. And again, a lot of that can be done through the evaluations that you guys are doing after the fact. But these are things just, again, kind of maybe you can incorporate this into your program evaluations, in some cases, you can incorporate this into staff evaluations so that you really are thinking consciously about how your program and how your staff are engaging with young people to support positive youth development. So these are a couple of the resources that I pulled a lot of this information from. And then there is a training. I believe that this link is still active. It is a two-part online training that you can also go to. I am recording this session, and we will actually upload this to our YouTube training channel. So if you went to YouTube and typed in Indiana Youth Service Association, we have a training channel. I currently have an older PYD up there, but we will replace that old webinar with this new webinar so that you can share this with other people as well. And with that, that is the end of this particular training session. If you guys have questions, feel free to type those in. And as a reminder, if you want to get that certificate of attendance, you're going to email Jamisha, and I'm typing in her email again so that you guys have that, but it's jharris@indy, INDY, S as in Sam, B as in boy.org. We can get those certificates for you guys. So I will open it up to questions. We have 2 minutes. Again, just remind you guys, you're all muted. So have to unmute if you want to ask questions. All right, so if there are no questions, then we are finished. Thank you guys for joining me and being a part of this. If you have any questions about anything else at any time, my contact information is here. Feel free to give me a call, send me an email. I'll say goodbye, and you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much.